Isabella Moore had worked tirelessly for over a decade to build the life she had. At 38, she was a self-made woman, a former lawyer who had turned into the CEO of a thriving tech startup. She had everything most people could dream of: a successful career, a loving husband, Daniel Carter, and a future that seemed as solid as the concrete foundations beneath the gleaming glass building where her company resided. But that day, today, everything began to crumble. Her office, once her sanctuary, now felt like a foreign place. She stared out the window, watching the city bustle below, lost in thought. Her mind wandered back to the years she spent climbing the corporate ladder, making sacrifices, giving up personal time and relationships for the sake of her work. She had always been the one to support Daniel, their shared dream of success driving them forward. The company they built together was supposed to be their legacy, and yet she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. There were small things, comments from colleagues that didn't sit right, odd emails that hinted at something off. It all seemed fine on the surface, but her gut told her otherwise. She wasn't sure why she felt uneasy, but the weight of it settled on her chest like a storm waiting to break. A sudden ping from her phone broke her concentration. It was a message from Daniel. "We need to talk." Her heart skipped a beat, but she brushed it off, assuming it was just business. However, deep down, Isabella couldn't shake the sense of foreboding that now clung to her. What could he possibly need to talk about? She wondered. The message left her with a strange pit in her stomach. Her thoughts were interrupted as she heard the familiar sound of Daniel's voice outside her office door. He didn't knock, just opened it without hesitation. She forced a smile, but the chill in the air seemed to deepen. "Isabella," he said, his voice unusually calm, "I think it's time we discuss something important." The words hung in the air like a warning. Before she could respond, he continued, "I'm firing you." The words felt like a punch to the gut. For a moment, Isabella's world stopped. She blinked at him, unsure if she had heard him correctly. "Firing me?" The words felt foreign, unrecognizable. She had built this company with him. She had put in years of sweat and tears, and now he was telling her that everything she had worked for meant nothing? Her voice was barely a whisper. "What do you mean?" "We built this company together." Daniel looked at her with cold, detached eyes, the same eyes she once admired. "I mean it. You're fired, Isabella. We're getting a divorce. And I'm with Melissa now." Melissa. The name sent a shock through Isabella's system, but she didn't let it show. The woman who had been nothing but a shadow in the background was now the one who had taken her place, not just in the company, but in her husband's heart. Isabella stood there, numb, unable to fully comprehend what was happening. "You're what?" she managed to stammer. Daniel's voice was matter-of-fact as he dropped the bombshell. "I've been seeing her for months now. She's going to help me take control of the company. I'll be running things from now on." Everything she had worked for, everything she had believed in, suddenly slipped through her fingers. Isabella felt the weight of betrayal crush her chest. The shock was overwhelming, but underneath it, a sharp, growing anger began to pulse through her veins. The betrayal was not just personal, it was professional. He had planned this. He had orchestrated it all with Melissa, and now she was being kicked out, discarded like a piece of trash. Her mind raced as Daniel spoke about logistics, legalities, and plans for the future. But all Isabella could hear was the deafening sound of her own heartbeat and the coldness of his words. She had trusted him, her partner, her husband, and now she was nothing more than an afterthought. Twist S1. As the conversation continued, a cold, hard realization hit her. This wasn't just about the divorce or the firing. Jacob and Melissa's relationship had been going on for far longer than she ever suspected. The depth of their deception hit her like a physical blow. Isabella's eyes flicked to her laptop, where an email had just arrived, an email she hadn't seen before. The subject line was innocuous, quarterly budget review urgent. She clicked on it out of habit, but as she scanned the contents, The ground beneath her seemed to shift. It was a plan. A detailed plan for the company's future, without her. She felt her stomach churn as she read through the email chain. Jacob and Melissa had been planning to buy out her share of the company, but the shocking part was the timing. They had been working on it long before the divorce announcement. Her stomach twisted as she pieced together the betrayal. She wasn't just being ousted from the company. They had been plotting to steal everything she had built, taking the business and her life from her without a second thought. Cliffhanger for interaction. Isabella stood frozen, staring at the email, her mind reeling. Her world, once so secure, was falling apart before her eyes. What would you do if everything you trusted was torn away in an instant? Isabella's mind was consumed by the dual betrayal. The loss of her marriage, the loss of her career, and the overwhelming sense of powerlessness. She had given everything to Daniel and their company, only to be tossed aside. But as the anger began to rise in her chest, something else began to take root. A quiet, unyielding resolve. She wasn't going to let them get away with this. The game had changed. Isabella stared at her reflection in the mirror. The woman she saw was different from the one she had been just a few days ago. She had always prided herself on her calm demeanor, her cool-headed approach to business, but now, beneath the surface, there was a fire that burned with quiet intensity. The betrayal by Jacob and Melissa had shattered her world, but it also ignited something within her. She was no longer the woman who had blindly trusted her husband. That woman was gone. In her place stood a woman with a single, burning purpose: revenge. Her mind raced, methodically piecing together a plan. This wasn't just about getting back what she had lost. It was about taking everything from them. The company, her dignity, Jacob's control. She would show him what happens when you push someone too far. No more tears, no more sorrow. Only strategy, patience, and the cold, calculated execution of a plan that would bring him to his knees. Isabella took the first step towards her goal. She didn't reach out to anyone for support. She couldn't afford to trust anyone, not even her closest friends. She needed allies, but the kind that wouldn't question her methods, the kind who owed her a favor. That's when she called in a contact from her past, a former tech colleague, a hacker who had once helped her with a small problem. She had kept their connection under wraps, and now it would prove invaluable. As she dialed the number, a flicker of doubt ran through her. Was she really ready for this? Could she become the person capable of such a ruthless, calculated plan? A small part of her wondered if this was all just a way to regain control over the life she had lost. But the moment she heard the voice on the other end of the phone, the doubt evaporated. This was happening. There was no turning back. "Are you sure about this?" her contact asked, his voice muffled by the static of the line. Isabella took a deep breath, her eyes hardening. "I'm sure. I need you to help me break into Jacob's system. He's not just going to pay for this. He's going to lose everything." The line was silent for a moment, and then her contact responded, "I'll be ready. Let's do it." As she hung up, Isabella felt the weight of her decision settle over her. This was no longer about anger or revenge. It was about power. She would take what was rightfully hers and leave nothing behind for Jacob and Melissa. They wouldn't even see her coming. But even as she prepared for action, she couldn't help but feel the smallest flicker of uncertainty. She had always been the one to remain calm, the one who solved problems with logic and reason. But this was personal. Could she really carry out a plan that would destroy the lives of the people she once trusted? Or was she just using revenge as a way to reclaim her dignity? The line between the two was blurred, and for the first time in years, Isabella questioned who she had become. The next few days were a blur of meetings, phone calls, and sleepless nights. Isabella's mind never stopped racing, her thoughts consumed with how to outsmart Jacob at every turn. But the first real obstacle came sooner than expected. Jacob's security system was more sophisticated than she had anticipated. No matter what she tried, she couldn't break through the firewalls. She sat at her desk, staring at the screen in frustration. It felt like everything she had worked for was slipping away, just like her marriage, just like her career. For a moment, she was reminded of her past, the feeling of helplessness when Jacob had first told her he was leaving, the way her entire world had collapsed in that moment. She pushed the thought aside. She wasn't going to let this defeat her. She had already come too far to turn back now. And then, like a flash of lightning in the dark, she found it, a weakness, a flaw in the system. It was a backdoor, hidden deep within the company's data storage, left exposed by an insider, a disgruntled employee, perhaps, or maybe someone who had once been loyal to Jacob and now sought revenge of their own. Isabella couldn't believe her luck. This was the break she needed. She immediately reached out to her hacker contact, the man who was going to help her take Jacob down. Together, they worked quickly, exploiting the flaw to gain access to the company's financial records. Every step was calculated, precise. Isabella knew exactly what she needed to do. Feed false information into the system. Start the process of slowly destabilizing the empire Jacob had built. And then, as if the universe was rewarding her persistence, she uncovered something even more damning. Hidden in among the financial documents was a deal that Jacob and Melissa had been working on for months. Plans to sell the company's intellectual property to a rival corporation. The company she had helped build, the company she had poured her heart and soul into, was on the verge of being sold behind her back. The betrayal was deeper than she had imagined. Her resolve hardened. This wasn't just about getting even anymore. This was about dismantling Jacob's entire world. Every last penny, every last shred of control, would slip through his fingers. She would make him feel the weight of his betrayal. What would you do if you found out your biggest enemy was about to make you a part of their past? She asked herself quietly. The answer was clear. She would make sure they never forgot her. As the days passed, Jacob's paranoia began to grow. He started noticing discrepancies in the company's financial reports. At first, he dismissed them as errors. But as they became more frequent, his suspicion grew. Someone was sabotaging him, but who? He couldn't figure it out, and the more he searched, the more frustrated he became. Isabella knew exactly what was happening. She kept her cool, maintaining a facade of normalcy while working in the background. But she couldn't help but enjoy the thought of Jacob squirming, of him slowly realizing that his control was slipping. And then it happened. Jacob reached out to Chris Anderson, his trusted ally, to confront him about the leaks. Chris, the man who had once been Isabella's close friend, now found himself caught in the middle of their battle. Isabella used this to her advantage, subtly manipulating Chris, planting seeds of doubt in his mind. She knew his ambition, knew how far he was willing to go to advance his career, and now he was going to help her. The more Isabella worked, the more confident she became. She didn't need to yell or scream. She didn't need to make a scene. Everything was happening on her terms. Jacob's world was crumbling, and she was the one behind it. How does it feel to watch someone crumble under the weight of their own lies? She thought, as she sat back and watched Jacob's paranoia continue to grow. Isabella knew that the final blow was coming. It wasn't just about setting things in motion. It was about making sure that Jacob felt every inch of it. He would pay for everything, for every lie, for every betrayal. She had the upper hand now, and it was time to make her move. As she sat in her office, preparing for the next phase of her plan, she couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. She had taken back control, piece by piece, and now she was ready for the final confrontation. Jacob and Melissa wouldn't know what hit them. The battle was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, Isabella felt a calm confidence settle within her. She had one final card to play, and she was going to use it to bring Jacob to his knees. Do you believe in the idea of karma? She asked herself. What's the cost of betrayal, I wonder? The answer was simple. It was everything, and she was about to make Jacob pay for it all. Isabella stood in the center of her office, the sleek glass windows framing the skyline, her reflection staring back at her from the polished surface of her desk. It was a moment of clarity, one she hadn't experienced in years. For so long, she had been consumed by betrayal and loss, a victim of her own circumstances. But now, as she gazed at the woman in the mirror, she saw something different, a force. She wasn't the woman who had been abandoned by her husband, stripped of her dignity. She was someone new, someone unrecognizable to the woman who had once silently borne the weight of her husband's infidelity. Her heart still ached, but it no longer crippled her. She had taken control, and now she stood at the pinnacle of the very revenge she had carefully orchestrated. This wasn't just about Jacob or Melissa. This was about reclaiming herself, her power, and everything she had been denied. Her journey wasn't simply about revenge. It was about redemption. The quiet storm within her had shifted, and she now had a clarity that both frightened and empowered her. Yet, even in her newfound strength, there were moments of doubt. Was this the person she truly wanted to be? The person who had plotted, manipulated, and destroyed? Or had she simply become a reflection of the pain others had caused her? The question lingered in her mind as she stared out at the city below. She had rebuilt herself, but was she rebuilding the right thing? The phone rang, breaking her reverie. It was time to take the next step. Her plan was about to enter its final phase. Jacob, meanwhile, had begun to feel the weight of his own mistakes. His empire was crumbling beneath him, the walls he had carefully built with Melissa's help beginning to crack. The stock price plummeted, key partners pulled away, and whispers of sabotage spread, like wildfire through the company. He could no longer ignore the signs. His control was slipping, and no matter how many phone calls he made or meetings he held, things were not improving. His desperation grew by the hour. He couldn't bring himself to admit that Isabella was the one behind it all. Not yet. But when his last attempts to salvage his reputation and the company failed, he did the one thing he had sworn he would never do. He reached out to Isabella. He was humble now, pleading for her help. "I know I've hurt you," Jacob's voice cracked through the phone, his desperation palpable. "But the company, it's all I have left. Please, I need you. Help me fix this, for both of us." Isabella's fingers curled into a fist, gripping the phone with a tightness that betrayed no emotion. Her initial instinct was to hang up, to leave him with his destruction, but she stayed silent for a moment. Jacob's voice, once a source of comfort, now only grated against her resolve. He was trying to manipulate her again. "No, Jacob," Isabella said, her voice cold, almost devoid of feeling. "You had your chance. This is all on you." His voice faltered. "Please, I never meant for it to get this far. You don't understand." But she did understand, and that's why she couldn't help him. This wasn't just about saving a company or fixing what had been broken. This was about the destruction of the man who had betrayed her, of the man who had thought he could erase her from his life as if she was nothing. He wasn't going to win. Not this time. Isabella set the phone down, her heart steady, her mind racing with the next phase of her plan. Jacob's desperation would only deepen from here, and she wasn't going to be his savior. She was going to be the one who watched him burn. As Jacob's pleas faded, Isabella couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. He had underestimated her, just like everyone else had. The woman he had thought was weak was now stronger than he ever realized. And now, it was his turn to face the consequences. News of the company's unraveling spread quickly. Within hours of the leak, the stock price took a sharp dive. It wasn't just a minor setback, it was a catastrophe. Jacob's once unshakable position at the top of the company was slipping through his fingers. And yet, as the chaos unfolded, he still couldn't bring himself to see what had truly happened. His biggest ally, a key partner in the company, distanced himself publicly. The man made it clear he was pulling out of the business, citing corporate instability and the sudden collapse of trust within the leadership. This move left Jacob isolated, his credibility now in tatters. The walls that had once held up his empire were crumbling, and there was no way to stop it. But for Isabella, the satisfaction wasn't in seeing Jacob's downfall. It was in the realization that she no longer had to lift a finger to make him suffer. His own lies, his own arrogance, had led to his destruction. She didn't need to further manipulate or fight for control. He had already given her everything she needed. The power was hers now. Later that day, Isabella received an unexpected email, a message from a source within the company. It was brief, but the information it contained sent a chill down her spine. Jacob's financial records weren't the only thing she had gained access to. She now had something much more dangerous: the full scope of Melissa's involvement. Melissa wasn't just an opportunist who had latched onto Jacob for power. No, she had been the mastermind behind much of the manipulation. She had seen Jacob as a pawn in her game all along. Everything, every step, every move had been orchestrated by her. And the truth was finally coming to light. Isabella's heart pounded as she read through the details. Melissa's intentions weren't just about taking the company from Isabella. She had planned to strip Jacob of everything he had worked for, using their relationship as leverage to control him. It wasn't just betrayal, it was a calculated game to take it all. Her fingers trembled, but her resolve only deepened. She had underestimated Melissa once, but not anymore. It was time to confront her. With a sense of quiet determination, Isabella dialed Melissa's number. The phone rang twice before Melissa answered. Her voice was cool, confident as it had always been. "Isabella," she greeted, a hint of amusement in her tone. "I didn't think you'd be calling me." "I think it's time we had a conversation," Isabella replied, her voice steady cold. "I know everything, Melissa. Your game is up." There was a pause, followed by a tense laugh on the other end. "You think you can control everything? You really think you've won?" "I haven't just won, Melissa," Isabella said, her voice now hard with certainty. "I've outsmarted you at every turn. And now, you're going to face the consequences of everything you've done." Melissa's silence spoke volumes. Isabella could feel the shift, the power dynamic changing. For the first time, Melissa was on the defensive. Isabella was in control and Melissa knew it. "I'll be seeing you soon," Isabella added, hanging up the phone without waiting for a response. The final piece had fallen into place. There was no going back now. The storm was here, and Jacob and Melissa were about to feel its full force. Jacob and Melissa's final confrontation was imminent, and Isabella would be there to watch it all unfold. She had been through the storm and had emerged stronger, but the journey was far from over. The real power now lay in her hands. Have you ever been betrayed by someone close to you? Isabella thought as she walked away from her desk, her mind set on the next steps. What was your reaction when you found out the truth? Would you have done what I did? The questions lingered as she prepared herself for the final act of her revenge.